Mr. Morris.
Good morning. I want to just thank Pedro Humberto Bruno de Carvalho from the Institute of Applied Economic Research for extending the invitation to participate in this crucial discussion. And of course, my appreciation for all of you for joining me today. We're here to discuss a topic integral to fostering a stable, vibrant society, tax reform. It's no great insight to say that smart tax policy, one that considers not just how much should be raised, but from whom revenue should come, is vital for a thriving economy. What is often overlooked, and a component of tax policy I'm passionate about, is the unseen roles taxes play in shaping our everyday lives, our communities, and the foundations of our politics. Today, I will share my insights and perspectives on how tax reform can address more than just economic challenges, but also how it can bring important and foundational changes to Brazil and beyond. Let me introduce myself. I am Morris Pearl. I have the privilege of being the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, an organization dedicated to reducing economic inequality through tax reform, championing a living wage for workers, and protecting the institution of democracy. Our membership is composed of extremely wealthy individuals who care deeply about their country and understand the urgency of addressing these challenges before it is too late. We were founded in the United States, but have since grown particularly in the United Kingdom. Our organization has been able to move the conversation and the window of opportunity on reform because we're an organization of rich people making the non-intuitive argument, that is, we as rich people should pay more taxes. When I'm interviewed on right-wing television, I'm introduced either as a crazy person who will entertain the viewers for a few minutes, or as having some unique idea that no one has ever thought of before. When I go to talk to legislatures, for better or worse, very few politicians turn down an opportunity to meet with the head of a group of millionaires. But our position, the wealthy should pay more taxes, should be intuitive and should make sense to tax the very wealthiest more than we currently do. Business people and investors want to build companies and invest in places where people have enough money, to pay for things, not in places where everyone is poor. Someone who owns the bar cares a lot more about how much money all the people in the bar have in their pockets than about the tax rate on his profits or the wages of the one person behind the bar pouring the beer. We explain to our legislators that most business people actually depend on a flourishing society rather than a society where the majority of the wealth is being hoarded by a select few. Before joining Patriotic Millionaires, I was a managing director at BlackRock, one of the largest investment firms in the world. My work included assessing government's potential losses from bank bailouts in the United States and in Europe. One day in the summer of 2013, I was at a due diligence meeting in a conference room on the top floor of a bank in downtown Athens, Greece. I walked over to the window so people wouldn't see I took 2 chocolate puddings from the dessert table. Looking down, I thought I was watching a parade for a moment before I realized I was actually watching a protest or maybe a riot moving down the street towards the parliament. And I turned around and I started wondering if I was doing any good for the rest of the people of Greece beyond the bank executives whose jobs we were probably saving by helping them get a bailout from the International Monetary Fund and the European Central Bank. After I saw the civil unrest that followed that economic crisis and called into question the very foundations of the Eurozone, I came to understand that extreme economic inequality invariably destabilizes nations and democracies. I knew something had to be done. While my focus has been addressing inequality in the United States of America, my formative experience in Greece demonstrated something else. Economic inequality is a global issue. And in the global world where our financial systems are totally linked, we must think about these challenges on a global scale. The current global economic order and the tax system that underpins it dramatically exacerbate inequality by aiding the wealthy in becoming extraordinarily rich and leaving the vast majority of people struggling to get by. While 80% of global revenue raised comes from tax on income and consumption, Only 4% comes from taxes on wealth. As in my own country, when we look at Brazil, it becomes hard to reconcile the extreme wealth of some with, for example, a social security system that struggles to meet the needs of people who work for a living. The fact that the top hundredth of 1% of Brazilians have an average tax rate of 1.5% compared to 11%, even in the 90th percentile, tells us about this disparity. But crucially, wealth inequality is not simply about the inability to pay adequately for social programs. It's about stability. It's not hard to understand why Brazilians might turn their back on a system or a government that enables the ultra wealthy to live so lavishly while critical safety nets atrophy. The Oxfam report from January, Survival of the Richest, presents a sobering reality check on the urgency of this challenge. The report highlights that the wealthiest 1% now own twice the wealth of the entire bottom 90%. Billionaires' fortunes are increasing by 2.7 billion US dollars per day, even as inflation outpaces the wages of 1.7 billion workers. And this disparity is not just a theoretical concern. It has profound real-world implications. In Brazil and across South America, we witness the consequences of extreme wealth concentration in large swaths of the population and entire communities grappling with limited access to basic services like food, education, healthcare. Extreme inequality incubates extreme politics. Authoritarians and radical political parties become attractive options when communities feel helpless. When a handful of wealthy people hoard the riches that could lift up all those communities, indeed entire nations, it should serve as a call for comprehensive tax reform. If the government does not provide economic opportunity, then a new government will. Progressive and fair taxation, when the richest pay higher levels of taxation than those who work for a living, can head off this challenge in Brazil and in every country and reinforce beleaguered democratic institutions. These two ideas, as I've stated, are inexorably linked together. Less economic inequality is required for social and political stability. However, achieving meaningful tax reform requires international collaboration. While Brazil can make significant strides independently, it must be combined with a holistic and international approach. A prime example of this is the recent development of the minimum effective tax rate, METR. This global tax policy is proof of the concept that international cooperation is indeed possible in this regard. I'm confident that will serve as a testament to the power of countries working together to close loopholes and ensure that multinational corporations pay their fair share of taxes. Shared global standards to tackle tax evasion is possible, and they are effective. Oxfam estimates a tax of just 5% on the world's multimillionaires and billionaires could raise 1.7 trillion US dollars per year, enough to lift 2 billion people out of poverty and fund a global plan to end hunger. Again, this is just an example of how global cooperation is required to deal with extreme wealth inequality. It serves as a template moving forward. Next month, the G20 will gather in India, where the Patriotic Millionaires will push participants to work together to enact new tax regimes, both nationally and internationally, that eliminate the ultra-rich not paying their fair share and introduce new rules that determine higher taxation of extreme wealth. We'll deliver a letter currently signed by over 300 prominent individuals, including 18 former presidents, prime ministers, 118 millionaires, 52 economists, 104 political representatives from nearly every G20 nation and some outside the G20. We're not naive. We do not expect the G20 will rewrite its agenda for the upcoming summit, including tackling our issue of global minimum tax and extreme wealth, but it should. And eventually, the G20 member nations will have to reckon with this growing challenge. The consequences of avoiding this issue may well be existential. The letter that Patriotic Millionaires will deliver is a testament to the growing public demand for action on wealth taxation. And we're not the first to demand action. A global petition secured more than 600,000 signatures, demanding they take action on this same issue. Public opinion polls show the majority of people want government action on wealth inequality and taxing the rich. A survey showed that 71% of Brazilians support the introduction of a wealth tax for the richest in the country. And yet, the G20 has thus far declined to take action. It's unacceptable to abdicate the responsibility. The Patriotic Millionaires will continue to supply pressure on participants of the G20. You are able to help. We hope to continue gathering signatures of economists and members of parliament. Your voice holds so much power and influence. Each of you will be critical to ensuring this message is heard. If you're willing to sign our letter, please reach out to Pedro. And there's reason for optimism. Namely, Brazil will have the G20 presidency in 2024 and will have a central role in shaping the agenda of the G20 summit next year. We hope you all will join our call to President Lula to ensure that wealth taxation is part of the formal G20 agenda for next year. A working group made up of experts with far greater knowledge than myself should be formed in advance of the gathering, which can propose the methods and means by which international standards are set for wealth taxation. Such an international agreement could stave off disaster by shrinking the dangerous levels of inequality, building a healthy working class, and buttressing beleaguered democratic institutions. We hope that President Lula will make this ambition a central aim of Brazil's G20 presidency. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. Much work has already been done. There's an abundance of policy proposals in wealth taxation from the world's leading economists. The public wants it. We want it. All that's missing is the political will. Now, before drastic economic inequality does irreversible damage to our economic fabric, we must address the endless race to the bottom that opponents of taxation engage in, based on this crazy notion that economic gains trickle down. This practice depletes government revenues, yes, but more importantly, it widens economic disparities. The effect of this on the nation's politics can be disastrous. History textbooks are filled with examples of the tension between extreme wealth and extreme poverty tearing apart once mighty nations. It's naive to think we're immune to this trend. By establishing shared global standards for taxation, we can create a level playing field that benefits everyone, including Brazil. This is an opportune moment for us to push for change. And of course, there'll be opposition. The common argument against progressive tax reform is the potential for capital flight, rich people moving to lower tax countries. This is greatly exaggerated, and it's not backed by the numbers or by the qualitative analysis. Otherwise, you'd expect nations in Western and Northern Europe to be devoid of wealthy people and the flood of billionaires arriving in developing countries. That is not the case. Even as we accept the premise that capital flight is a threat, there are strategies to counter that through international cooperation and the implementation of tools like a global asset registry, which can prevent revenue loss while ensuring a fair tax system. This has been advocated by former Colombia Minister of Finance, Jose Antonio Ocampo, and endorsed by the likes of Independent Commission for the Reform of International Corporate Taxation. Tax reform is certainly a technical and bureaucratic endeavor, but it's also a vital tool for a just and equitable society. That is to say, a stable society. International cooperation is the key for overcoming the challenges posed by global tax evasion and by the chronic undertaxation of extreme wealth. By working together to establish shared standards, we can level the playing field and create an environment where economic growth benefits everyone. Brazil deserves nothing less. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrissey.